Let's take a look at some information and charts on Ripple for Brave New Coin. Not something I necessarily like to cover, but it is on the top 10 by market cap. So many people follow it. Many people are invested in one way or the other in its success, in its failure. Ripple at its heart is more identifiable with SWIFT, intra-bank transfers, than cryptocurrency, in my opinion. It has varying degrees of centralization that aren't present in other cryptocurrencies, varying degrees of sort of decentralized ledger technology or business stuff that isn't what most people would consider cryptocurrency. They have RippleNet, which acts as a go-between for foreign exchange. And you can dig into that. You can look at those numbers. You can also realize that you don't need Ripple, the token, for that process. You need Ripple, the company, for that process. All sorts of baggage with Ripple, the token, XRP, the token, people involved, Brad Garlinghouse, goes on and on and on. Really, the biggest thing to pay attention to if you're in Ripple in any way is this SEC charge, pending lawsuit, investigation, whatever you want to consider it as. That is almost a year old now. Whether or not we'll see some clarity on this by the end of the year, I don't know. And you could game theory that into things being bullish or bearish for Ripple, the token. Ripple, the company, is probably going to be fine. I don't think they'll have an issue paying any fines that they end up paying. The bigger thing is whether or not Ripple, the token, gets relisted on US exchanges or not, which unfortunately, if you are a crypto person, you need to be rooting for Ripple, because if Ripple loses in a big way, then they're going to start going after, they being the SEC, is going to start going after everything and everybody because they got their low-hanging fruit, and now they can use that as a precedent to go after kind of virtually anything, including Link. That's really one that comes to mind. That's probably the most Ripple-like in their continuing sales of tokens here. And again, the Ripple market cap, depending on how you want to measure it or think about it or care about market cap at all, it is top 5, top 6 if you exclude USDT or not, in between a few other tokens. And this is completely off of the US exchanges now, out of US indices, baskets. It's out of the Bitwise top 10, out of the Grayscale trusts, out of any exchange in the US that is following the law. They kind of just have to be. So as far as a trading perspective, if this stuff gets relisted, yeah, game on, right? This thing could pump to oblivion in the very micro near term and then just get faded for the next 15 years. I don't know. But the point is, it's definitely a tradable event. So if you see that, I'll be taking action in some way. I'll say that much. Should I be allowed to as a U.S. Citizen resident? And really the big issue with Ripple is the supply. So they created this out of nowhere, which, hey, lots of ICOs did that. It is what it is. As long as everybody's informed, that's all I care about. I don't have a bias on this necessarily one way or the other. It's the continued misinformation and disinformation of people and influencers who are sort of on the Ripple payroll in one way or the other. So Ripple has all these tokens. They have a bunch of tokens that they put in escrow a few years ago, and they're dripping them into the market slowly. They bring out 3 million every 3 months and say, hey, does anybody want to buy this? And people buy it, people don't. And if they don't, it goes back into escrow. So it's not just blanketly market sold every month, but the proceeds of those sales go to Ripple, the company. So I don't really see how that necessarily matters. It doesn't help Ripple, the token holder, if Ripple keeps selling tokens. I mean, that's just simple supply and demand. Ripple themselves also have some tokens in a pretty large percentage, and we can look at the Ripple sales, XRP sales by Ripple. See, here's the genius of the brand confusion, but XRP sales by Ripple quarterly since 2016. You can see how it ramped up, how they were kind of trickling these sales mostly in Polo. If you were paying attention at the time, you could see that. We didn't necessarily know who was selling, but as it later was found out, it was likely to be Ripple, the company. And probably during or as soon as they realized they were getting investigated, they shut that down. And now it's just been the run-of-the-mill institutional sales, OTC is what they call it. And that has almost eclipsed all-time highs for quarterly notional sales for Ripple, the company. So Ripple, the company, is making around 150 million per quarter selling Ripple OTC. As long as you're aware of that as a Ripple holder or user, that's all that really matters to me. I'm just here to pass on information. Here's the node topology. It says there's 933 nodes worldwide, and you can dig into these nodes and see which one of these, which percentage of these are controlled by Ripple, which percentage are on the most recent version. It looks like most of them, 80% of the nodes at least, on the most recent version. The next upcoming version, slowly gaining steam here. So nothing to comment on specifically there. But then when we talk about validators, this is where the decentralization piece really shines, because ideally, if you have full decentralization, you aren't reliant on any validators run by, in this case, Ripple, the company. And it is nearly impossible to know which of these is run by Ripple directly or indirectly by subsidizing server space or infrastructure costs, stuff like that. And this goes with any proof of stake or proof of stake like network that has validators. If they're all on exchanges, if they're 51% on exchanges, that's bad. If they're 51% in Asia, that's bad, right? We're losing the decentralization argument completely if we're just recreating or trying to reinvent the wheel. And most of the Ripple services, from my understanding, don't require the chain at all anyway. So really, to Ripple, if you're them, what do you care? At the end of the day, you've got this network. It works, it runs great. It does minimally what it says it needs to do. But if most of the activity that you care about goes through RippleNet or is involved in Forex exchange for banking functionalities, I mean, that to me as a company is all I would care about. If we look at on-chain stats for the token, on-chain stats for the most part not really going anywhere over the past several years. Spikes, peaks, and troughs, some spam attacks here, but nothing too crazy. Most recently, it did hit multi-month highs on transaction counts. Average transaction values also spiking up to multi-month highs. I don't know if this is a data error, data artifact, or if this is legitimately just an insane amount of average transaction spike recently. Now, the escrow transactions that you can see on chain do affect and influence average transaction values. So that's also worth considering. And this isn't really tradable information. It's just something that I look at and watch on most chains. Active addresses, though, in the fill here, when I see something like this, that usually indicates to me that, yeah, there is something going on in the background, DeFi-wise, or somebody's connected to this chain that I either hadn't looked into or hadn't heard of. And you can see on a daily basis how much this has climbed over the past few months. So typically this is DEX activity or some sort of DeFi activity. This looks very real. It doesn't look non-organic. It doesn't look bot-like. It doesn't look like it's some mass server farm. NVT also declining here. So you're seeing an increase in on-chain activity relative to market cap. And it could be, this is a DEX. I know this is probably hard to see, but could be this. This is a sologenic DEX. I'd never heard of this until I sort of poked around, and it looks like it runs on Ripple. Didn't know that. They have pairs, right? Like, is this going to move the needle for me, for Ripple? Is it going to change any analysis at the end of the day? No, but it's just good to know where this activity on chain is coming from. They also have Gate Hub. Hadn't heard of this one either, but it looks like they do have markets that I assume are DEX-like or run through Ripple in some way, shape, or form. So it's always good to investigate, just to touch deeper when you see stuff like this, because this is real. This is activity on chain for sure. This is not RippleNet or anything like that I can tell. And I just have to assume it's DEX activity. We can also look at MVRV relative to price. MVRV is a measure of on-chain activity relative to market cap, similar to NVT. And if MVRV is telling you anything, it should spike with price. It should correlate with spikes in price. And arguably it did so in 2014. You have a local high, all-time high in price there. You have a local high in 2017. You have the current all-time high as well in 2018, which had a bit of a spike on MVRV there. Not something I would see as a usable signal, because MVRV had been declining for months before that spike up. But currently I'd say, yeah, it's a pretty usable signal. We had a high in price correspond almost 1-to-1 with MVRV. So it might have taken 6 years, but I think where it sits now is actually decently looking for a great signal, up or down. So historically, anything below kind of 0.7, 0.6 has been the buy zone down here in 2020. And then anything above 2 2.5. Anything above 2 is certainly be careful territory. This isn't only an N of 2, you know, this is only the most recent highs here, but it does correlate, does look good. Buy zone 0.7, sell zone, anything above 2, 2.5 is be careful territory, overbought conditions. Ripple also recently released a NFT fund, their Q3 report. It's always funny to sort of read what they focus on or what they're talking about. They're kind of justifying the fund, which is perfectly reasonable and fine, as they're talking about NFTs here and trying to get NFTs onto Ripple, which is smart business decision. I just don't think, I haven't seen much uptake for that organically anywhere. Not to say it's not happening, but they can launch a fund and throw money at all sorts of stuff. But if nobody cares, then it's not really going to move the needle. And they go on to talk about ETH killers doing well and an update on the lawsuit. And they say that still in a discovery phase, and it'll conclude by mid-January 2022 as far as the discovery phase is concerned. And they say, yeah, this may feel slow, but they're trying to do it as quickly as possible. So we'll see, but I think we'll know by the end of next year. I'd imagine we know the outcome of what's going on with Ripple, and the SEC chair Gary Gensler, as they mentioned up here, it seems like he wants to go after projects of any kind for lots of stuff. They also mentioned in their blog, this was recently in October, that the RippleNet stuff is doing well customer-wise, but again, I'm pretty sure this doesn't affect the token. They say it's powered payments, but I think that's questionable until I see some hard data on that, whether or not that's the case. If anything, it's a sort of one-to-one in and out, doesn't affect supply demand for the token on a day-to-day basis. But hey, I could be wrong about that. Worldwide, Google Trends past 5 years for Ripple, just sort of semi-flat down. Nothing too exciting here. Price has been consolidating for weeks, so you wouldn't expect to see Google Trends picking up here in a big way. But let's say next year we start to see SEC stuff come out, price starts perking up. You're going to see this probably very likely push all-time highs again if the lawsuit is in Ripple's favor in any way, because then you'll see everybody relisting it, and there's just going to be just euphoria mania all at once, most likely. So I'd watch for that. Flipping gears to technicals, we have the 1 year MA multiplier in the green, multiplier in the red, midline in the white here. And for the most part, this has actually done quite well for Ripple in that it tells you to sort of buy the lows, sell the highs. Even most recently in April, May, June area, it told you almost to the dollar, well, certainly to the dollar, but almost to the penny that 210 area was the be careful zone. So currently how I'd read this is anything below the MA would be a buy, anything above the midline and the multiplier certainly would be a sell. So let's say the lawsuit gets resolved by mid next year. These are definitely the levels I'd watch. I'd watch 270, I'd watch 450, and let's say we get a late cycle rotation into something like Ripple. Also the levels I'd watch if this thing goes bananas. How this looks now on the daily. So if we look at the 5200, the VPVR, volume RSI, volume and RSI aren't really telling you much. VPVR isn't going to tell you much other than their support much lower. But really what I'm watching for is how this sort of ascending consolidation resolves in the next month by end of year. Because if this is bullish, or if it leads to bullish continuation, then you could easily expect a move from 275 to 330, which would be an all-time high retest. This was the wick. I think 330 is the all-time high, or at least the high on Bitstamp, but it wouldn't surprise me if this thing moves up to that area. And you'll know probably rather soon whether or not it holds this level. It's at the 200. It's at the horizontal resistance. If you're bullish, you're hoping that this isn't some ascending head and shoulder mess. But if you like scratch off lottery tickets, this one's for you. On Cloud, it doesn't look bullish, but it also doesn't look super bearish, just neutral. This thing has just been ranging since April. Nothing really to mention there. And on the 2-day, just when things look like a mess on a low time frame or on the daily, you just move it up. And on the 2-day, you can kind of see clearly since from 2018 to 2020, just below the cloud the whole time. Sure, it got in the cloud a few times, but for the most part, just below. Now, recently it's been messy, but it's mainly been above. So I'd be watching this. I'd be watching 130 as a level for breakout potential. And like I said, you could see, I'm not positioned for it. I probably won't even trade it, but you could see a move from 275 to 330 again. Not because Ripple's amazing, but just because altcoins like to do silly things at the end of the year. Ripple BTC on the 3-day, still below the 200, still below the cloud, sort of in this range. Probably doesn't do much of anything until it either breaks below this range or breaks above 2600 sats. Certainly doesn't look super exciting as RSI is just kind of continually just getting faded here on no momentum. So not too much going on the BTC side of things. Against ETH, though, it looks like it's ready for a rip to all-time lows again. And just like you saw in 2017 and even in 2021, you can see it get this late cycle push and then dump, push and then dump. Even in 2018, there it is, right? It's sometime in Q4 typically where you get this weird rotation within 1 week. It's over. If you blink, you miss it. So is that tradable now? I'm not so sure. I think ETH looks incredibly bullish relative to everything else. So it's hard to think rotating into this now makes sense. I think it's a bit early, but post ETH move, when this thing rips down lower, yeah, why not? If you're trading this agnostically, historically, that's worked out quite well. Late cycle moves, late rotation moves benefit alts greatly. Lastly, let me just mention the ETH-BTC fund and DeFi portfolio. I trade for Techemy Capital and Enzyme.finance, a non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see everything, including AUM performance, allocation, all of the trades I make in the trades tab down below, as well as the deposits and withdrawals for individuals or entities in and out of the fund or portfolio. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and